I need someone women instantly notice the moment we enter a room together, my girlfriend said before leaving me for a wealthier club promoter known around the city. I quietly let her walk away forever. 11 months later, she arrived at a luxury hotel event and froze watching security escort me directly to the VIP section upstairs. I need someone women instantly notice the moment we enter a room together. She said it the way people say things they've been rehearsing for weeks. Calm, deliberate, like she'd already made peace with the weight of the words before she handed them to me. I set down my glass. We were at her apartment. A Thursday evening, the kind that feels ordinary until it doesn't. The TV was on in the background, some show neither of us was watching. Her leg was crossed away from me. I noticed that before I noticed anything else. I looked at her. Lucy, 27 years old. Dark hair, she always wore down on weekends. A laugh that could fill any room she wanted it to fill. She was looking at me the way you look at a painting you've decided to take off the wall, not with anger, but with a kind of settled certainty. The decision was done. This was just the announcement. Okay, I said. She blinked. She'd expected something else. Pushback, maybe. Questions. The standard architecture of a relationship argument. Raised voices, followed by silence, followed by negotiation, followed by temporary repair. She'd probably scripted her responses already. But I didn't give her the cue. Because in the 2 seconds between her sentence and my response, I understood exactly what she meant. Not the surface of it. The core of it. She wasn't asking me to change. She wasn't describing a problem we could fix together. She was telling me what category I failed to belong to. She wanted the kind of man who enters a room and causes a visible reaction in other women. The kind of man whose presence creates social electricity. Status that other people can see, touch, photograph, and post. She wanted to be noticed by being next to someone impossible to ignore. And in her honest assessment, I wasn't that. Not enough heads turning. Not enough pull in the nightlife scene. Not the right kind of visible. I could have argued. I had a good job. We had 2.5 years. I had never once embarrassed her, never once disrespected her, never once made her feel small. I could have laid all of that out like evidence. But something in me understood, very quietly, that none of that was the currency she was talking about. So I said nothing else. I sat with it. The silence stretched between us, soft and final. She watched me, and I think my stillness confused her. She may have interpreted it as defeat, as proof that I had nothing to offer, as a man with no defense because he knew the verdict was fair. She wasn't entirely wrong about the silence, but she was wrong about what it meant. I wasn't defeated. I was just done. Okay, I said again quietly, and I meant it completely. She left that night. Not physically, that came later. But something between us closed like a door, and neither of us reached for the handle. 11 months later, she would walk into the lobby of a luxury hotel on a Friday evening, dressed in something she'd clearly planned for weeks, expecting to move through that room the way she always moved through rooms, on the arm of someone everyone was watching. Instead, she would freeze, because the person security was escorting past the rope line, past the lobby, directly upstairs to the private floor where the real gathering was happening. Was me. I didn't realize it then, standing in her apartment with the TV still murmuring in the background. But that moment changed everything. She made it official 2 weeks later. A text, not a conversation. 4 sentences. The last one said she hoped I understood. I read it once, set my phone face down on my kitchen counter, and went back to the book I'd been reading. I finished the chapter before I looked at it again. There was nothing to respond to. She hadn't asked me a question. The news about Qley arrived the way most social information arrives, through Stella, who was technically a mutual friend but in practice had always been more Lucy's. She called me, not to check on me, but because she was excited and couldn't contain it, and probably told herself she was being kind by letting me hear it from someone who knew me. She's seen Qley, Stella said. You know Qley, right? From the nightlife scene? I didn't actually. Not personally. I knew the name the way you know certain names in a city, through repetition, through proximity, through other people's conversations. Qley Ashford, mid-30s. He'd built a reputation running VIP tables at the kind of clubs that had lines around the block on weekends and charged $300 for a bottle of vodka that cost $12 at a grocery store. He was locally famous in the specific, contained way that nightlife figures are famous, enormous within a certain radius, invisible outside of it. His Instagram was a catalog. I looked at it once, briefly, the way you look at something you already understand. Rooftop dinners, private yacht content, women on either side of him in every photo, always looking at him the way Lucy had described wanting women to look at someone. Bottle service. Private jets that, if you looked closely enough, were always rented. Designer clothing. The specific, curated excess of someone whose entire identity was the performance of having arrived. He was exactly what she described wanting. And I'll be honest, for about 48 hours, that information sat in my chest with a specific kind of weight. Not jealousy exactly. Something quieter. The strange, disorienting experience of watching someone replace you with a direct answer to their complaint. She said she wanted X. She found X. The logic was clean, and it was hard not to feel, briefly, like a rough draft that had been set aside for the finished version. But something else happened in those 48 hours. I noticed something about Cole. I was scrolling through his page. Only once, I want to be clear about that, and something caught my attention. A small thing. An inconsistency I couldn't quite name. A detail in the background of one photograph that didn't match the caption. The kind of thing most people scroll past because they're looking at the foreground. I didn't say anything about it. I put my phone down and I didn't look again. But the thought stayed with me, the way small true things tend to stay, quietly, without fanfare, waiting. Meanwhile, the social consensus organized itself quickly and efficiently. Word traveled. People who knew both of us arrived at their conclusions with the confidence of people who'd been waiting for permission to have opinions. Jackson, my closest friend, was careful about it. He didn't celebrate, didn't pile on, but he also said, "She was always looking for a certain kind of scene, man. You know that." In a tone that was meant to be comforting but landed somewhere adjacent to agreement. Mutual friends grew scarce. Not dramatically. Nobody made an announcement. They just got quieter, responded slower, became suddenly busy in the specific way people become busy when they're choosing a side and don't want to admit they're choosing a side. I understood it. I didn't like it, but I understood it. Social circles are ecosystems. They reorganize around the most visible energy in the room. And right now, Lucy and Cole were the most visible energy. I was the static left behind, the negative space where something used to be. I started going to the gym in the mornings. Not as a statement. Just because the mornings were emptier now and I needed somewhere to put the energy. She started posting about 3 weeks in. Not about him directly, at first. That came later. Initially, it was environmental, photographs of restaurants I recognized as expensive, candid shots in what appeared to be a private booth, the kind of soft lighting that doesn't happen by accident. No captions that named him, just images that implied a life upgrade. The visual language of someone who had leveled up and wanted the record to reflect it. Then the videos. Club footage, mostly. The specific, joyful chaos of VIP sections. Bottle service arriving with sparklers, a crowd moving below, Lucy laughing with her head thrown back in the way she always laughed when she wanted someone to photograph her laughing. She looked beautiful. She looked exactly the kind of beautiful that gets noticed when you enter a room with the right person. And it worked. The engagement was immediate. Comments from women she knew, women she barely knew, women who'd never met her but recognized the aesthetic. Heart emojis. Fire emojis. The algorithmic approval of a life that looked like winning. The captions started arriving in the 4th week. Know your worth. Stop settling. When you stop accepting less, life gives you more. Some people are seasons. Others are forever. These were sent to me. Not by Lucy. She would never have done that directly. But by mutual acquaintances who'd clearly decided that forwarding these posts to me was an act of informing rather than cruelty. Screenshots with no message attached. Screenshots with "just saw this, sorry" attached. Screenshots with laughing emojis from people I realized, in those moments, I should have already let go of. I never responded. Not once. I didn't post anything in reply. I didn't make my own content about moving on or growth or choosing yourself. I didn't text anyone my reaction. I read the screenshots, understood what they were, and put my phone in my pocket and went back to whatever I'd been doing. Jackson asked me once if I was okay, in the way that real friends ask, looking directly at you, waiting for the real answer. Yeah, I said. I'm good. He studied me for a moment. You're not going to do anything? There's nothing to do. He nodded slowly. He didn't entirely believe me, I think. He was waiting for the moment when I'd crack open and the actual reaction would come out. He was a good enough friend to wait without pushing. But the actual reaction was this. I was paying attention. Because Lucy's posts, the more I looked, and I want to be clear, I looked rarely and briefly, and then stopped, had started to feel like something slightly off-center. A vacation post captioned with a location that, when I looked it up, was a 4-star resort. Nice, genuinely nice, but not the 7-star, chartered helicopter type of luxury the photograph's composition was implying. A dinner at a restaurant I'd actually been to, which was good, but not in the stratosphere the lighting suggested. Small things. The kind of things you only notice if you're looking carefully, and most people weren't looking carefully. Most people were seeing the foreground. The sparklers. The smile. The man whose presence caused visible reactions in rooms. One post in particular stopped me. A photograph from what appeared to be a private rooftop. Lucy in the foreground, city lights behind her, dressed impeccably. The caption, "The view from the top is different." But the rooftop, I recognized it. Not from personal experience, but because I'd seen it in an event listing 6 months earlier for a venue that rented by the hour for photo shoots. I put my phone down. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just noted it, the way you note a crack in a wall you haven't decided what to do about yet. And then I went back to work. The opportunity came in April. My company had been running a project for 8 months, a partnership with a regional logistics firm that, if it went well, would expand our market presence significantly. I'd been the primary point of contact since September. I knew the file better than anyone. When the partnership hit a complication in March and a senior director left, there was a 2-week period of internal reorganization where the project needed someone to lead it across the finish line. I put my name forward. Not dramatically, not as a power move. I just sent a clear, calm email to my manager laying out my familiarity with the account, my proposed approach for the final quarter, and what I thought a successful close would look like. 2 paragraphs. No urgency, no desperation. 3 days later, I had the title. The title came with a salary adjustment that was meaningful enough that I revised my monthly budget and, after a beat, started looking at apartments. Jackson took me to dinner to celebrate. We went somewhere nice, not to perform it, just because we felt like it. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than our usual and raised his glass and said, "I've been waiting for this for 2 years," and I believed him. The apartment came together in May. 12th floor, south-facing. The kind of light that makes a room feel like a different category of room than the one you used to live in. I bought real furniture for the first time, not expensive in a showy way, but considered. A couch that I chose because it was exactly right rather than because it was available. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I started cooking more, running on weekends, sleeping better. The version of me that had spent 2.5 years making himself slightly smaller to fit comfortably in someone else's frame started, quietly, to expand back to his actual shape. And then Stella called. It was a Thursday afternoon in late April. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken in 2 months, and the last conversation had felt like someone checking on a situation rather than checking on a person. But something made me pick up. "Hey," she said. She had the specific, careful brightness of someone who'd rehearsed the beginning of a conversation. "How are you doing?" "Good," I said, genuinely. A pause. She believed me slightly more than she expected to. "I'm glad," she said. "Then, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Did you ever notice anything strange about Cole? Like financially? Or with how he talks about his business?" I felt the familiar, quiet sensation of a small, true thing rising to the surface. "Why?" I said. "No reason, just," she stopped. "Someone said something to me recently. About a girl they know. Who dated him. What did they say?" "Nothing specific. Just that things weren't exactly what they seemed. With him." A long pause. "Stella," I said carefully. "Is Lucy okay?" "Yeah, I think so. For now." Another pause. "She seems happy. Online, at least." We talked for another few minutes about nothing particular and then said goodbye. I sat with the call for a moment. Her follower count had grown noticeably. She was getting brand inquiries now. I heard through the narrow channel of people who still talked to both of us. A jewelry company. A travel brand. The infrastructure of a life that looked like influence was assembling itself around her. And I'll admit something. There was a Tuesday in early June when I sat at my desk after a long day and I felt, genuinely, a flicker of the doubt she'd planted. Maybe she was right. Not about Cole specifically, but about the principle. Maybe the kind of visible status she'd described. The kind that rooms respond to, that cameras find naturally, that people reference in conversation without being asked. Maybe that actually was the thing that mattered. Maybe what I'd been doing, the quiet work, the internal rebuilding, the promoted title and the new apartment and the honest sleep. Maybe that was just the story I was telling myself to dignify a loss. Maybe the world was actually organized the way Lucy had always believed it was organized, by who gets noticed first. I sat with that thought for a while, and then I noticed something. I'd seen a photograph, weeks earlier, of Cole at a rooftop event in the city. In the caption, he'd mentioned a business venture, a hospitality group he was launching, new venues, expansion. He'd tagged several partners. I searched 2 of those names. One account had been inactive for 8 months. The other didn't exist. I stared at that for a long moment. Then I closed the app. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't building a case. I wasn't going to do anything with what I'd found. But the open loop in my mind, the one that had started with a single background detail in a photograph 11 months ago, had just gotten slightly larger. And somewhere, 6 or 7 miles across the city, Lucy was smiling for a camera on a balcony I was increasingly certain she'd stood on for only as long as it took to take the picture. The industry event was a Thursday in late July. My company had started sending me to these things, a natural extension of the new role. Panels, networking receptions, the kind of professional gatherings where the conversations that actually matter happen in the margins, during the cocktail hour, next to the bar, when 2 people realize they have a contact in common. This one was at a mid-sized venue downtown. 140 people, maybe. Adjacent industries, logistics, supply chain, a few people from hospitality and commercial real estate. The kind of room where everyone had a card and everyone was watching to see who knew whom. I was talking to a woman named Diana, late 30s, sharp, ran operations for a hotel group, when the name came up. We'd been talking about the nightlife economy, specifically how event-based revenue had changed post-pandemic, when she mentioned a promoter she'd dealt with who'd pitched her company on a partnership. He's locally known, she said, with the specific careful neutrality of someone choosing words. Has a following. Presents very well. Something in her tone made me ask, did the partnership go anywhere? She looked at her glass. No. Due diligence raised some things. What kind of things? She glanced up. Are you asking professionally or personally? Personally, I said. I think I know who you mean. A pause. She made a small decision. Vendor relationships that didn't check out. References that couldn't be verified. A previous venture that apparently closed under circumstances that were. She chose the word carefully, uncomfortable for the people involved. She didn't say his name. Neither did I. The public image, I said. Constructed, she said simply. Carefully and expensively, but constructed. There are people in this city whose entire operating model is the gap between perception and reality. They use the perception to access resources and relationships they then leverage forward before anyone notices the gap. She smiled without warmth. It's not new. I nodded. We talked about other things. She gave me her card. We shook hands when the event ended. On the way home, I sat in the back of a cab and looked out the window and thought about Lucy. Not with triumph. I want to be clear about that. With something closer to the specific sadness of watching someone buy a beautifully wrapped box and not knowing yet that it's empty. She'd left me for a constructed image. And she didn't know, couldn't know yet, that the construction was already showing its seams. I didn't call her. I didn't call Stella. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just sat with it as the cab moved through the city. And then, as I stepped out onto the street outside my building and looked up at the light in my 12th floor window, I remembered something Diana had said in passing. Offhand, almost to herself, near the end of our conversation. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a rumor. She'd been talking about Cole. By September, others were saying the same thing. Not loudly, not in public, but the city has its own quiet telegraph. The specific network of people who were there, who work adjacent to certain industries, who share certain information in certain tones at certain dinners. And that network, by September, was humming with variations on the same story. I heard pieces through Jackson, who worked in commercial real estate and had started encountering Cole's name in conversations that made him uncomfortable. A lease application on a new venue that had required unusual guarantors. A catering company that was still owed money from an event 8 months ago. A former business partner who, when asked about Cole by a mutual contact, had said only, "I'd be careful," and then changed the subject. I heard pieces through Diana, who I'd had coffee with twice since the event. She was building towards something professionally that I had the contacts to help with, and the relationship was genuinely useful in both directions. She told me that 2 women from her broader network had independently shared experiences of dating someone who'd presented significant financial resources that turned out, on closer inspection, to be heavily borrowed, temporarily inflated, or occasionally fabricated. She didn't use Cole's name in either telling. She didn't need to. The pattern was consistent enough to be a signature. And online, something had shifted. Lucy's posts had grown quieter. The daily content had become weekly. The vacation photographs had stopped. The club videos, which had arrived with such regularity through spring and early summer, had slowed to one every 2 or 3 weeks, and something about them had changed in quality, not production quality, but emotional quality. The laugh in the more recent videos was slightly different than the laugh from March. Still beautiful, still performed, but with a particular undertone of effort that hadn't been there before. Stella noticed. She called me on a Sunday afternoon, and this time she didn't bother with the careful brightness. She came straight to it. "She's not doing well," she said. "How bad?" "I don't know exactly. She won't say. But the last time I saw her, she looked tired. Like actually tired, not the kind you can fix with a night's sleep." A pause. "I think something happened with money. With his money, specifically." She made a comment that didn't make sense, and then tried to walk it back. I listened. "He's still posting," Stella said, with a disbelief she no longer tried to conceal. "He posted yesterday. A dinner. With other women. I thought about Lucy seeing that." "Is she okay?" I said. "Like safe?" "Yes, I think so. It's not that kind of situation. It's more like she's starting to understand something, and understanding it is humiliating, and she doesn't know how to be humiliated." Stella paused. "She's very proud, you know." "I know." A silence. "You're not going to say I told you so?" Stella said. Not a question. "No," I said. "Not even a little?" "No." She was quiet for a moment. I think she was reassessing something. "Okay," she finally said. "I just wanted you to know." After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a while. The afternoon light was coming through the south-facing windows in long, low lines. My apartment was quiet in the specific, satisfying way that things you've built for yourself tend to be quiet. I didn't feel victorious. I felt the strange, clean sorrow of a thing running its natural course, a course that had always been visible to anyone willing to look at it clearly from the very beginning. The hotel event was in mid-October. It had been organized by a consortium of commercial real estate and hospitality investors, a formal networking event, a genuine one, the kind where actual decisions get made and relationships get built rather than performed. I'd been invited through a direct introduction from Diana, who'd been invited through the group's organizing committee. The invitation came with specifics: Friday evening, a hotel in the city's financial district, dress code noted, RSVP required. I wore a suit I'd bought in August, charcoal, well-fitted, nothing showy. The kind of suit that doesn't need to announce itself. The hotel's lobby was already alive when I arrived at 7:15. Beautiful space, high ceilings, dark wood, the kind of ambient lighting that makes everyone in it look like they've arrived from somewhere more interesting than wherever they actually came from. Security at a specific door near the east bank of elevators, a list being checked, a corridor that led to a private elevator. I gave my name. The security guard, a large, unhurried man in a dark suit, found it on his list, nodded, and said, "Mr. Reeves, we'll take you up directly." Not loudly, just matter-of-factly, the way people speak in rooms where things are taken for granted. The elevator opened. I stepped toward it, and that's when I saw her. Lucy was across the lobby, maybe 40 feet away. She was with a woman I didn't recognize and a man who was not Qley, someone newer, probably, someone being auditioned for the role. She was dressed well. She was always dressed well. Hair down, the way she wore it on weekends, the way she used to wear it when she wanted to be noticed. She was scanning the room with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent the last year learning how to move through spaces like this one. Looking for the table that mattered, the group worth approaching, the person whose orbit was worth entering. And her scan landed on me. A beat. 2 beats. Her expression didn't collapse. Lucy had too much control for that. But it changed. A recalibration so fast and so total that I could see it from 40 feet away, which told me how significant it was. She saw the suit. She saw the security guard. She saw him turn to me with recognition, not the checking a stranger's ID kind of recognition, but the "we were expecting you" kind. She saw the private elevator door standing open. She saw the small cluster of people near the elevator who were already orienting toward me with the particular body language of professional familiarity. A man in his 50s who extended his hand, someone else who raised a hand in greeting from across the corridor. She saw all of it in approximately 4 seconds. And I saw her see it. I didn't stop. I didn't change pace. I didn't perform casualness or perform indifference. I just continued moving toward the elevator the way I'd been moving, because there was nowhere else I needed to be and nothing I needed to prove. But I did meet her eyes. For 3, maybe 4 seconds. Across the lobby, over the heads of other people, through the warm ambient light of a hotel that had put us both in the same room, without warning or preparation. She looked at me the way you look at something you'd categorized as one thing and have just realized is another thing entirely. Not with regret, exactly. With the specific, unguarded shock of a person whose internal map has just been corrected by the territory. I held her gaze for those 4 seconds. Then I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. The man in his 50s, Marcus, an investor I'd met through Diana, said, "Glad you could make it. We've got good people upstairs." He said it the way you say things to people you've already decided belong in the room. "Glad to be here," I said. And that was it. Upstairs, the private floor was everything the lobby had been promising. A smaller, quieter, more serious gathering. 30, maybe 35 people. Real conversations. Business cards exchanged because the business was real. I spent 40 minutes with a woman who ran hospitality acquisitions for a mid-Atlantic investment group. I had a drink with Marcus and 2 of his partners. Diana waved from across the room and mouthed, "I told you," and I smiled. At no point did I think about Lucy. Or rather, I didn't think about her in the way I might have expected to. Not with the slow burn of delayed vindication. Not with any performance, even an internal one. I just thought, briefly, quietly, she would have liked this room. And then I moved on to the next conversation. I don't know what she did in the lobby after the elevator closed. I don't know if she stayed for the main event. I don't know if she found the man beside her useful, or if he turned out to be another version of a borrowed image. I didn't ask anyone. I stayed upstairs until 9:45, said my goodbyes, and took a cab home through city streets that were still warm with an October that hadn't decided to turn cold yet. Cole's unraveling happened in pieces, the way these things tend to happen, not in a single dramatic moment, but in a series of quiet avalanches, each one dislodging something that dislodged something else. It started with a former venue partner filing a civil claim in early November. The details were public record. The amounts were significant. The language in the filing, misrepresentation of assets, failure to fulfill contractual obligations, deliberate inflation of financial standing in partnership negotiations, was the legal formalization of everything that had been circulating quietly through the city's professional networks for months. 2 other claims followed within 3 weeks. A woman posted on a private but widely shared platform about a relationship with someone whose description, while keeping the name anonymized, was specific enough that anyone familiar with the nightlife scene knew immediately who she was describing. Another woman confirmed it in the comments. And then another. The specific details varied. The pattern didn't. The borrowed lifestyle. The leveraged image. The money that was always about to materialize from a deal that was always about to close. The jet that was always rented for the occasion. The table at the restaurant that was always the last of the credit available on a card that was already near its limit. And Cole, to his considerable credit as a performer, kept posting through all of it. A dinner, a trip, a video from what appeared to be a yacht. Right up until, one morning in mid-November, everything went private, and then, within 48 hours, the accounts went dark entirely. Lucy's online presence had been contracting for weeks before this, but the final collapse was swift. She deleted the vacation content first, then the club videos, then the posts with the captions, "Know your worth, stop settling, when you stop accepting less," disappeared in a single night, as though someone had pressed a reset button. What remained was thin, a handful of older photographs, a few personal posts from before any of it, the curated residue of a life that had been edited backward. Mutual friends who'd been enthusiastically documenting her upgrade quietly stopped referencing it. The group chats where her content had been celebrated went silent on the topic. The social consensus that had organized so quickly and efficiently after our breakup reorganized itself with the same efficiency, and nobody made an announcement about that either. I didn't say anything. I didn't post anything. I didn't text Stella a single word about any of it, though I knew she was watching the same collapse from her own vantage point. And then, on a Sunday evening in late November, while I was reading in my apartment with the south-facing windows going dark behind me, a message arrived. From Lucy. I held my phone for a moment. The message was long. I'll say that, it was long, and in the parts one let myself read, it was genuine in the specific, painful way that messages are genuine when someone has run out of alternatives to honesty. There was something about understanding now. Something about being unfair. Something about time and clarity and the difference between what things look like and what they are. I read to the middle. Then I stopped. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted her to suffer. Not because I was performing strength or engineering a lesson. But because there was nothing to say. She'd wanted to be with the man the room noticed. The room had been wrong about which man that was. And everything that needed to happen as a result of that misunderstanding had already happened, to both of us, in opposite directions, with 11 months of quiet and work and honesty as the only tools either of us had used. I put the phone down. I deleted the message. I went back to my book. Outside, the city went about its business, indifferent and continuous, and somewhere across it, in a silence she would have to build her way out of herself, Lucy sat with what she now understood. I didn't reach out to help her with that. Some things a person has to carry alone. I've thought about what she said, the phrase itself. I need someone women instantly notice the moment we enter a room together. It was a sentence about the room, about other women, about entering, about the moment of arrival. Everything in it was external. Everything in it was about being witnessed. And I understand that. I do. There's something genuinely human about wanting to be with someone whose presence announces itself. Wanting to feel, in a room full of people, that you chose correctly, that the person beside you confirms something about you, reflects something worth seeing back to the world. I'm not above that wanting. But there's a difference between the room noticing who you arrived with and the room knowing who you are. One is about the entrance. The other is about everything that happens after. Lucy spent 11 months curating the entrance. The lighting, the locations, the sparklers, the boat, the borrowed altitude of a man whose entire value proposition was the performance of height. She was seen. She was noticed. She got the room's attention with both hands and held it for as long as she could. And I spent those 11 months building something that didn't need a caption. I'm not going to tell you I knew it would end the way it ended. I didn't. I was just doing what made sense. Working, growing, paying attention, staying honest. I wasn't running a long game. I was just running. It happened that the game rewarded that. On a Friday evening in October, in the lobby of a hotel I'd earned my way into, the room noticed me. Not because I arrived with someone spectacular. Not because I'd engineered a moment. But because I'd spent 11 quiet months becoming the kind of person that rooms like that one were built for. And she saw it. Without me saying a word, without a single post or caption or carefully arranged photograph. She saw the whole thing in 4 seconds across a lobby, and she understood what it meant. I didn't need her to, but I won't pretend the 4 seconds weren't what they were. She wanted the room to notice who she walked in with. By the time they finally noticed me, she wasn't beside me anymore.